Hey guys, it's Bertie, and this video is the beginning of a brand new series. This series will consist of storytelling, and it's also an opportunity for you guys to be featured on this channel. If you're wondering how you could get a chance to narrate for this series, go to my Discord and go to the Scary Story Narrators channel. There you can submit an unlisted video where my mods and I will review you reading a story, any that you choose. There are some things we are looking for, but make sure to go read the rules over there. It's all the way at the top and they're on the pinned messages. As for the people in these videos, I'm trying to make it like a one-time thing for each person, but if you guys like a certain person's voice, make sure to check out their social links in the description below, and you can even request them to come back on the channel. But for this first video, since it is the introduction to this entire series, I will be reading the first story. I don't plan on being in every single video, simply because I do have the main channel to work on and my music, but I still think this is a very fun idea for the entire community. I'm thinking about making this a weekly series, and every week there will be a different theme. Today's theme is creepypastas. Now, these aren't popular creepypastas, these are more under the radar ones because we are getting creepypastas that are, 5 minutes each, just so everyone has a chance to talk. With that being said, let's get started with the video. Her Silence, written by Cat Crane. He turns the steering wheel in different directions, taking different roads when he needs to. He needs to go through the woods to get to his destination. He's confused, but not about that. What confuses him is why his sister is being so silent as she sits in the back seat. The time is currently 6:36, and he just picked up Emily from her friend Julia's house. He was thankful he didn't have to get out of the car and knock on the door, as she was already standing out in the yard, waiting for him. He had tried making conversation with her. How'd it go at Julia's? Did you have fun? Has her rabbit gotten better? But everything he said was met with silence. It weirds him out as he grows slightly concerned. Is she okay? But an uncomfortable knot forms in his stomach when he glances in the rearview mirror and sees her staring at him. Or more specifically, the side of his neck? Are you alright, Em? She doesn't reply. He looks back again when he hears an odd sound come from her mouth and sees her licking her lips. What are you doing? No answer. He lets out a shaky sigh before reaching and turning the radio on to put some music in the car and distract him from the situation. Eventually, they pull up in the driveway and he stops the car, unbuckling and opening his door. He looks back and she's still sitting there, unmoving, but her eyes follow him. Come on, Emily, you can't stay out here. What are you doing? Nothing. Seriously, what's gotten into you? You haven't said a word. No sound leaves her mouth as she unbuckles, opens the door, and steps out of the car. He runs his hand through his hair in slight confusion and relief before reaching back in the car and grabbing his phone out from one of the little slots beside the cup holder. He presses the button as he closes the door and heads toward the front door of the house, his sister following behind. 2 missed calls and 12 unread messages from Emily. What? Why was she texting me? When was she texting me? The time now reads 7:13. He feels uneasy, like something's not quite right, but he doesn't know what exactly. Pulling out the key and sticking it into the hole in the knob, he opens the door and walks inside. When he looks behind him, Emily isn't there. Emily? He raises an eyebrow and he turns to look for her. Emily, where'd you go? He doesn't see her. He suddenly sees an Emily-shaped shadow walk into the yard and he follows. What are you doing? You know you're... But he stops. Nobody's there. This feeling of dread hits him in the chest as he looks out into the woods beside his house. He sees a figure standing, just beside the outline of the trees. It's short with long hair, just like Emily. This isn't right. Has she lost her mind? Maybe it's him losing his mind. Chills run up his spine as he walks closer to her. Emily, what are you doing? She turns and runs out of sight. This doesn't make sense. She's usually terrified of the woods, especially at night. There's no way she'd go in there unless something was wrong. Without thinking, he takes off into the trees. He doesn't know what's going on, but he isn't gonna let Emily get herself into danger. He turns his phone flashlight on as he pushes past all the weeds in his way and avoids tripping over anything. Emily! His head turns when he hears a twig snap. Come on, Emily. If this is some kind of prank, it's not funny. The tension rises beneath him as complete silence fills his ears. Oh no. Is it a bear or a panther? He shines the flashlight in every direction, trying to see something, anything. He can feel his breathing quicken. Is Emily okay? Snap. Another twig. No, 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 no. He's not gonna leave her out here alone. He's gonna find her, even if he dies trying. He feels his phone buzz against his palm, and he looks at the screen. Another text from Emily, and he lets out a relieved breath. At least she's still alive. He opens his messages and reads over what she said, before letting out a confused and fearful gasp. Crack. This time, it's the leaves, and it comes from directly behind him. His hand shakes as he slowly turns around and lays eyes on her. A low growl, a scream, silence. His phone buzzes and glows from the ground. At 6:34, Emily had texted him. Dude, what happened to picking me up? 6:36. Mike, answer me. 6:37. What are you doing? 6:41. Idiot, reply, please. 6:43. Mike? 6:50. Mike? 7:02. Mom isn't answering either. 7:05. Somebody please reply. 7:11. Come on. 7:14. I can't stay at Julia's forever. 7:16. Are you alive, Mike? 7:20. Talk to me. 7:34. I'll be there soon. My name is Bertie, and thanks for listening.
This story is titled Pass It On, written by Emma Froh. It's quite an interesting concept. Those little pass it on messages, I mean. Chain letters and people telling you, post this in 5 different comments or else you'll die tonight. Interesting indeed, but the idea lacks originality. It's the same story with each one, pass it on or die. People pass it on and they go on living, a happy ending for everyone. But what if there was a little twist? Let's say that there's a photo out there. It's not one of those can't be found anywhere else type of pictures. It's actually really easy to find. Just use your chosen search engine and type in black and white photo of twins. You should be presented with a variety of different black and white photos of twins. But let me help you and tell you what to look for. You're looking for a picture of 2 twin girls wearing black dresses and white headbands. The twin on the left has a straight face while the one on the right is smiling. Found it? Good. Now, as you'll see, there's nothing particularly unnerving about the photo. It may be a little creepy, but other than that, it looks as normal as any other picture you've ever come across. Now here's the twist. If you do pass it on, you die. Now I know most of you, given this particular set of choices, would choose to leave the picture be. But allow me to elaborate upon what happens when you don't pass this picture on to someone else. If you leave it alone after seeing it, you'll have nightmares. I know. Bad dreams don't sound so bad when compared to the alternative. But trust me, it gets worse. It all begins with something simple. Before long, you'll see the twins standing side by side in the darkness. The girl on the left will leave, and you'll be left alone with her smiling twin, and just before you wake up, she'll whisper, "Pass it on." And her smile will widen ever so slightly. I know, it doesn't sound like much of a nightmare, but it's the first of many. It's fairly subtle, but with each successive nightmare, things begin to change. Gradually, the smiling girl gets closer and closer to you, while her smile widens to impossible lengths. You won't be able to help but feel greatly disturbed and unsafe when it happens. Don't worry, that's normal. What's next, however, not so much. You'll try to wake yourself up. You'll try to move, but nothing will work. You'll find yourself trapped. She'll bring up various instruments. A knife, chains, gasoline, matches, many devices to make you feel uneasy. Then you panic. You can't help but think of all the horrible things this twisted, sadistic child has in store for you. And does she ever have some horrible things in store for you? Let's take a moment to think about the possibilities. What do you think she'll do to you? Wrap the chains around your head and pull until your skull splits? Gouge out your eyes, or cut out your tongue, or slice off your ears? Burn you alive knowing you can't move? That and more, my dear. You take the term unimaginable torture too lightly until you fall asleep. If you think she'll lash you with chains, she'll do so only after she's laid them in fire and stuck railroad spikes in your back. If you think she'll burn you, she'll tear open your torso, pour gasoline into the wound, and then light the match. You'll wake up screaming. Your body will remember the pain it's endured while you quiver in fear. Every time you wake up, you'll notice subtle differences about your body. A bruise here, a scratch there. But as each nightmare gradually gets worse, so do the marks which shall be left behind. Before long, the scratches will become fresh, bloody scars. If you dreamt that you took a sledgehammer to the knee, you'll wake and rise only to find your legs buckling below you as pain surges through your kneecaps. All the while her words linger in the back of your mind. You'll try to avoid sleeping, but it's no use. The twins make their way into your reality. They're always there, at your home, at your place of work, or at your school. You would fight back, but their visage appears in place of the faces of your loved ones. Eventually, you'll hide yourself away from everyone, in an effort to avoid seeing these demonic children. It's all in vain, however. You'll see them in that millisecond of darkness when you blink. You'll see them in reflections and in your peripheral vision. You'll see them everywhere. You can't escape. You can consider suicide or even attempt it, but they won't let you go so easily. That shotgun that you've got hidden in the closet, the revolver in the nightstand, useless. How strange. They seem to be jammed or missing a trigger. A cocktail of cold and flu and pain medications won't help either. It's so very odd indeed how you just can't seem to hold them down long enough for them to take effect. Soon enough, you won't be able to distinguish your dreams from reality. You'll awake from one torturous experience only to be greeted by alternative horrors. Without realizing it, you've given the twins a new playmate. And do they ever like to play? Well, at least one does. While one plays with you, the other one will stand there watching, chanting, "Pass it on," over and over again, all the while ignoring your cries for help. There's no happy ending to be had. Should you remain optimistic, I'm afraid you're just as naive as those who came before you. And there were many, oh, so many. And you won't be the last. I've made certain of that. Now, you have a decision to make. Now that you've seen the picture and discovered the consequences, whatever shall you do? Might you leave the picture be and pray that this is just some twisted story? Or will you decide to pass it on? My name is Juno. Thank you for listening.
When the circus came to town. The tents appeared in the middle of the night, without preamble. There was some heated discussion at the city hall, because not even the mayor knew they were coming. They must have worked out something though, because the gypsy circus stayed. Our town wasn't big enough to support even a fair, so this was big news. That was how I found myself with my older brother Tommy and his friends that evening. I was just 15 then. And though we were in a small town now, my mother hailed from Boston. There's no way she would cut me loose to run around on my own. But if she'd known how bad Tommy and his friends really were, she would have known I was much better off alone. "How much money you got?" Frankie asked, punching my shoulder. Of the 3 older boys, I hated him the most. He regularly hit, kicked, and ridiculed me, while my own brother laughed about it. He was twice my size. I was a rump back then, but I dreamed of the day I could stand up to him all. I gave him the 20 my mom had given me, but not the 5 I tucked into my hat bill. If nothing else, I wanted to sneak a candy apple later. Dad was a dentist, and we didn't have things like that around my house. They abandoned me when we walked inside that midway. I've never been to a circus before. There weren't many rides, but huge tents loomed everywhere. Barkers told us to come one, come all, see the magnificent beast of the wild, or the horrifying freaks of nature. I laughed at that one. I'd ridden in with the freaks of nature. Still, I wanted to see a lion. They looked so majestic on television. Reluctantly, I parted with $2 and stepped inside. The tent smelled of sawdust, sweat, and dung, but inside were the most fantastic creatures I'd ever seen. I picked a peanut off the ground and fed it to an elephant, then sat on a bench to await the show. The lions were my favorite part. I knew they were big, but I never expected anything to be that huge. I held my breath when the lion tamer stuck his head in one of the creature's mouths. Its incisors looked as long as my fingers. Its back teeth, which I knew were called carnassials, from a book my dad gave me, worked like scissors to cut into your meat. No way would I ever have the guts to stick my head in there. After the show, I debated spending another $2 to watch the same show again, but I really wanted that apple. As I made my way to the food trailers, a girl called out to me, "Read your fortune for $1. The sight of her took my breath for the rest of my life. I wish that she could have seen her own fortune instead of mine that night. She didn't deserve what happened to her. I stared at her, transfixed. Her eyes were 2 different colors. I wondered if she wore contact lenses to achieve the effect in order to look more striking. One was icy blue, the other was brown, like mine. The effect was jarring, even more so because she was lovely. Long black hair, full lips, dressed like a genie from a TV show, with her smooth tan belly bared. Hormones trumped hunger, and I let her lead me into her tent. She took my palm and stretched it out in front of her. She talked for a while, giving me vague predictions. Then she gave me a long look and said, "You need to stand up for yourself. Do not let others control your fate." I always wondered about that later, if she really saw that. It proved to be good advice. I wish I heeded it. She walked me out after my reading, her hand tucked into my arm. "Well, what do we have here?" Frankie boomed. "The little monkey has a girlfriend." Her hand tightened on my arm, and then she smiled. I'm taking a break. Frankie caught her arm as she tried to walk by, and Tommy and his friend James blocked her. I wanted to tell them leave her alone, but my voice was frog-hung in my throat. Hang on, Frankie said. I got $1. I want my fortune told. Matter of fact, he leered at her. What will 10 get me? To my horror, he grabbed her waist and pulled her against him. She struggled free and snarled something in a foreign language. Then she spat on his shoe. Frankie backhanded her and dragged her into a tent. I turned to run, and James tripped me. I went sprawling into the dust, and my mouth filled with blood. James held me up, and I heard a click as he opened the switchblade he always carried. He pressed it against my back. One move and I'll slice your spinal cord, he said. Snitches end up in ditches. It only lasted a few minutes, but it seemed like an eternity. They brutalized that girl. I heard her struggle at first, then nothing. That nothing terrified me. I was crying. Blood, snot choking me. People walked right on by and nobody seemed to notice anything wrong. Something was horrible. The newspaper said her father found her naked and beaten in that tent. It was 2 days before she could give the police a description. I was relieved when the police pulled up in front of our house. Don't say a word, Tommy hissed, or I swear on my life I'll end you. I wish I could say I spoke up and told the police everything, but I didn't. I thought her description would be enough and the DNA, but I misjudged small-town politics. Frankie, Tommy, and James spun some story about a girl being a prostitute and soliciting them for money. They said she grew angry when they didn't have enough and threatened to cry rape if they didn't bring her money. They said another gypsy had beat her to make the story look real. The judge closed his briefcase and let them go. We walked outside together. I've never felt so sick, ashamed. Tommy and his friends stood beside me in their fresh suit and ties, looking like altar boys. An old gypsy woman approached. She muttered something, then made a sign in the air with her gnarled fingers. Frankie stepped toward her, and James caught his arm. The girl sobbed against her father, her beautiful face still swollen and discolored. She whispered something to the old woman and pointed it at me. The old woman's eyes narrowed, and she made another sign. That's enough, my father said, and led us away. The circus disappeared, and within a week, my brother and his friends were dead. Tommy got his hand caught in a garbage disposal at the restaurant he worked after school as it chewed his arm. They thought the pain was making him delusional because he was screaming about the lion's teeth. He bled out before the ambulance got there. James fell off a ladder while helping his father patch their roof. The fall severed his spinal cord. Frankie died in the most horrible way of all. He wrecked around Johnson's Bend one night and his car caught on fire. Rescuers said they'd never forget his screams. I figured he's still screaming and burning in the place he went. I dreamed about that old woman every night. She said, "Your crime is silence. You stood quietly and let evil reign, thus sealed your fate." One morning, my tongue felt funny. When I peered in the mirror, it looked like a piece of bark was attached to it. It felt like a bark too. My mom was still in her room, so I didn't bother her. I somehow knew it was my time. I went to the woods behind our house. My steps grew heavier as I walked, and I could barely drag my feet through the leaves. When I looked down, my legs no longer looked human. They were forming into a tree trunk. Roots curled from my toes and spiked into the ground. I raised my hand to feel my tongue, and my arm froze there. Bark raced down it, falling in place like Legos connecting, covering what was human. With no surprises, I saw that girl walk out of the woods. "I know it isn't your fault," she said. "I begged my Baba for mercy. She said you must learn a lesson. You will be a tree until you grow and mature enough to bear fruit. When the first apple falls from your tree, you will be human again. I hope you will always stand up for yourself and others after that." It took 3 years, but I'm thankful for that lesson. This has been Liminality, and thank you for listening.
The Dangers of Fame by Emma Froh. I awoke to the sun shining through the slit in the curtains and an odd feeling. When I sat up, I was struck with confusion when I saw my surroundings. This wasn't my house. How did I end up passed out on the floor in someone else's home? "Okay, think. What happened last night?" I said, rubbing my head in what seemed like a futile effort to make the memory return. Just then, something clicked. The party. My friends and colleagues held a party in celebration of another successful book completed. Did I really drink that much? No, it wasn't that. I knew what a hangover felt like, and this feeling I had wasn't that. Something didn't feel right. I didn't feel right. It was as if something was missing, but I just couldn't put my finger on it. I went to stand up but froze at what I saw next. I saw blood. It smeared and stained the hardwood floor. I jolted to my feet and searched my body for any cuts or scars. I found nothing. If I wasn't the one who had been hurt, then that meant that someone else was here with me, possibly bleeding to death. I shoved my hands in my pockets, rummaging around for my phone so that I could call for help. Searching my pockets for the phone led to no avail. I looked around the room once more to see if there was a phone that I could use. I saw nothing. I explored my unfamiliar environment only to find that there were no phones whatsoever in the house. Maybe if I went outside and found a neighbor, they could help. I looked outside and saw that I was in the middle of nowhere. I had no neighbors to call upon. This was bad. I had to find the other person and get out of there fast. I looked everywhere, opening door after door. I looked in bedrooms, bathrooms, upstairs. I called out to the person, hoping that they would yell back and I could pinpoint their location. I heard nothing. Suddenly, out of the nothing, I heard a truck pull up outside. I ran down the hall in a panic. I came face to face with yet another door. It was open though, and I could only assume that, at the time, it led to the basement. I heard footsteps making their way to the front door. I entered and quickly made my way into the darkness. I tried to be as careful as I possibly could while descending the steps into the pitch-black basement. As soon as my foot touched the floor, I heard the door upstairs open, then slam shut. "Honey, I'm home, and I've got a surprise for you," he shouted as I heard footsteps making their way to the basement. I stumbled around, trying to find a place to hide or something to hit him over the head with. Just then, I tripped over something. I hit the ground and started feeling around to see if I could figure out what it was. I grabbed a hold of something. Someone's foot. For a split second, I was relieved to have found the other person. It was still kind of dark, so I couldn't really see much, but I was able to make out the shape of a girl sitting in a chair. "Don't worry," I whispered. "We'll get out of here soon." Our captor was at the threshold of the basement. I turned around, looking for a place to hide. Something caught my eye. I saw the tools that were sprawled out on top of a table, glistening in what little light had filled the room. I scurried under the table and pressed myself tightly up against the wall. I saw a bat leaning against the side of the table. When he wasn't paying attention, that's when I'd make my move and get both of us out of there. He turned on the light. When he hit the bottom step, the captor came into view. Well, the bottom half of him anyways. He was wearing dress shoes and a tux. I saw the girl a little more clearly now. She was covered with scars. Her skin was a sickening tint of white from the amount of blood that she lost. "Isn't it beautiful?" "Well, it's not nearly as beautiful as you are, though." The unknown man draped a silky white dress over the girl and got down on one knee. The edge of the table was just barely covering his face. He took her hand and slid a ring on her finger. The way her arm dropped to her side reminded me of a rag doll. I wondered how she could be so calm and so still in this situation. That's when I realized the grim fact that she was dead. I let out a gasp and quickly covered my mouth in an effort to stop the noise. The man didn't seem to notice. "You've made me a very happy man. You know that? I mean, we've had our moments, but I never stopped believing that we would be together someday." I listened closely to him. He sounded very familiar. Did I actually know this psycho from somewhere? He stood up and made his way toward the table. I slowly extended my hand towards the bat. He shuffled through his tools for a second and finally found what he was looking for. A book dropped to his side. My book. He turned around, gave the corpse a kiss on the cheek, and made his way toward the stairs. That was my chance. I gripped the bat and shot out from under the table. When I was right behind him, I closed my eyes and swung as hard as I could. After a moment, I opened my eyes and saw him standing not 3 inches from my face. I jolted back and fell. I closed my eyes again and started frantically swinging. "Get the hell away from me!" I kept waving the bat around, hoping that when I opened my eyes again, he would be laying face down. I stopped for a second and hesitantly opened my eyes. He was still standing, looking straight ahead at the body in the chair. How was he still standing? How could he have not noticed me screaming and hitting him with the bat? "I'll let you get ready," he said before turning around and making his way up the stairs. After seeing his face, it hit me. He was at the party. I could have sworn that I saw him at the party. He was one of the waiters. He brought me my drink. Then, the rest is kind of fuzzy, but I vaguely recall him carrying me out to the truck. Then I was here, and he took the bat and... Wait, the bat. I got ready to swing again, only to find that I wasn't holding it. I looked back at the table, and there it was, propped up against the side. But I could have sworn that I had grabbed it. What the hell was going on? Then I saw something that explained why I couldn't grab the bat, and the feeling that I had earlier. That feeling that something was missing. I soon realized that what was missing was a heartbeat when I saw my body sitting in the chair with the forehead bashed in. My name is Slash, and thank you for listening.